like to play, which is raise your hand if there's an empty seat next to you. Okay? If you'd like to have a seat and aren't afraid, it's okay. We're not giving any more prizes away. If you'd like to leave, that's fine too. I won't take offense. I've got nothing else to hand out. Although I've got a euro, which is worth, I think, about $50 US. I think that might be really popular. Well, that is by far the most incredible introduction I've ever gotten. Certainly isn't a lot to live up to, but I'll do my best, and off we go. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I haven't been out here for a couple of years to speak at what used to be Python Italia, and I'm going to talk to you about something that has nothing to do directly with Python. So if someone lured you in here thinking it was Python directly related, it's okay to leave. Okay? So, first, I'd like to say that these are my opinions. Okay? I'm clearly unqualified to give you these opinions. As you heard, I studied Latin, Greek, the minor in ceramics. My mother thought that I was going to grow up to become homeless. So, if anything that I say here angers you, then fine, then I've done my job. That's good. I'd like to at least get some sort of reaction out of people. If you don't like what I'm saying and want to say something different, then get your own damn talk, okay? I'd like to start, however, with a few quotes, okay? This is great because I didn't even have to write these. My starter project at Google was code.google.com. That was back when SourceForge was pretty much the only game in town. And a lot of people started using it, and they would come up and they would ask us strange little questions. Like this one. I'm not going to read the slides. I'll give everyone a chance to read. Okay, so nothing crazy about that. Let me get this one. Okay, so and another one. I get the feeling that there's a theme here. We're talking about people, about dealing with people's insecurities. Okay, and we call this the genius, right? And there was a very succinct, one more quote here before I go on and actually do some talking. This is a great way of putting it. There's this desire to be elite, right? And to sort of go off into a cave and write some masterpiece and show up and just present it to the world, fully polished, fully complete, sprung from your mind, much like the myth of Mozart, who would sit down in the myth and just write entire pages of music without errors. So to talk a little more about that, I'm going to talk about something completely different. Now for something completely different. Why do people, myself included sometimes, buy products that celebrities endorse? There's a bolt box of cereal. It's got Michael Jordan in it. I had to find out who Michael Jordan was, by the way. Human nature is to idolize celebrities, right? To imitate them. If I eat this box of cereal, man, I'm going to be able to play basketball like Michael Jordan. People won't admit that, but they're thinking it. They're thinking, I'm sure Michael Jordan gets up every day and eats a whole bunch of sugar-laden cereal. That's exactly what he does, right? But it's the same in the world of programming, right? We have our heroes, right? This is Python. We've got Guido, right? Everybody's like, wow, Guido, oh my God, he wrote Python. He might not like himself. Turns out there's a few other people involved, right? Still a great guy. Absolutely great guy. We've got Brian Koenig, we've got Rob Pike, we have Linus Torvalds, we've got Larry Wall, who might release another piece of software at some point. The fact of the matter is that these guys deserve some credit, but they don't always deserve all the credit, right? There's a mythology that grows around them, and it gets bigger as the culture gets bigger, as the product gets bigger. So I'm here to bring some very bad news to you. There's no thing. Actual geniuses are incredibly rare. Few and far between. But the ultimate defense, like I said, is to go in your cave and come out with this brilliant invention, right? You want to be seen, and I do too to some extent, you want to be seen as a genius by your peers. Don't want to show people your messy mistakes, or the false start you made, or the wrong path you took. It comes out of insecurity, right? There's a fear of showing any mistake ever here. It's sort of, you have this desperate need to be seen as clever, right? Believe me, I speak from experience here. I understand it. As a result, you go off in your cave, And the classic example here, and my wife loves to give me shit about this, asking for direction. How long will you drive around lost before asking for direction? Oh, many are. I'm not laughing at that. So, big deal. So why is this a problem? Okay, it's a problem because it gets things going more slowly. You learn more slowly. Your project gets bugs fixed, gets code written, gets things designed more slowly. The quality of your code will remain low. If you create a low bus factor, how many people, I see showing you, who knows what a bus factor is? Wow, this is great, we're getting it out there. So a bus factor is the number of people in your project that have to get hit by a bus that are going to leave you in a world of shit. Pure and simple, okay? Bus factor of 1 means that guy gets hit by a bus, you're in deep trouble, okay? Coming out of that cave and working with other people are ways of, increasing that bus factor, getting up to 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's not an actual bus. You can get hit by a bus, but people get hit by a bus in many different ways. They might get married. They might have kids. Might quit their job and move to another job. They might get a job. Right? There's a lot of things that are going to halt someone's work on your project, especially if you're working on an open source project, right? So, but I can't stress enough how this inhibits progress, right? There's a high risk of you going off into your cave, working on this piece of genius art, and coming back and finding out it was the wrong thing. Or that nobody cares, right? How many people sit down and write 3,000 or 4,000 lines of Python without ever running it once? Anybody? Okay, why would you go off and write code for a week or two without having anyone else look at it? Or talk to anyone else about it, or get other people's input, right? You want that type feedback loop. You might write a function, you write a test, you might write a function, try it out, see if it even works. See if it even parses, right? So this inhibits your individual progress, but you don't learn as quickly, right? It's harder to sort of improve your skills. But the interesting thing is this isn't just a computer science problem, right? It pervades all disciplines, sciences especially, math, anthropology, anyone people are writing papers or that sort of thing. So there's that whole thing where you don't want to share with somebody because it's credit, and everyone has to put their name on a paper. And how is this advancing science? It's slowing it down. I got another quote for you. So, even if you're a genius, working with other people is going to make or break you. I know that we've got I think 700 or 800 Googlers at this conference this week, right? We have a pretty crazy interview process. We've interviewed plenty of people who are really ridiculously smart or really, really good at something. But it turns out that they can't work with another human being, right? That's a problem. It's a problem because there is no software out there that's widely used by tens of millions of people that's written by one person. And in fact, it's not counted. Right? It may start with something written by one person, but eventually it grows and gets more contributors and it snowballs. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Sometimes the person who originally wrote a piece of software drifts away from it and hands it off to other people to maintain it. So how do we avoid this trap, right? How do we avoid sort of falling into the genius net? First thing is to lose the ego, okay? Go for a collective project ego instead. Like the Apache Software Foundation is a great example of this. Okay, it's projects that are built around the community. Okay, they may have a great collective ego, right? They're really proud of the software, but individually, you're out to build a better piece of software. And if I write something and make a mistake, well, that's good. If someone else does, that's good. But again, you want to learn from these mistakes. Now, I find this particularly compelling because, as you heard, as someone outed me, or two people outed me, I don't have a degree in engineering, okay? I got my degree in engineering in the open source world, writing code that other people ridiculed. Well, they were very kind about it, but basically, I got tons and tons of feedback from really smart people because I was really trying and I kept improving. Criticism is not a bad thing. There's two rules, though. Give it politely and take it politely. Criticism is really valuable. One of the most valuable things to me, as someone who gives talks, is to get positive or negative, but I would say constructive feedback about my talk. Did I speak too fast? Did I speak too slowly? Did I have too many slides? Did I go to too many subjects? Did I do make too many Monty Python jokes? I don't know, right? But remember, the thing is that you're not your code, okay? Your code is something you've created, but it's not you. Someone criticizes it, they're not out to get you, okay? I'll give you an example. A friend of mine I worked with at Apple left Apple to join a small company as an engineering lead. And they didn't really have a lot of good, healthy coding practices. So he said, I'm going to start doing code reviews. And the manager's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever, the director, and then fine, do whatever. Start doing code reviews. You can do this way, this is wrong, there's a problem here, there's a bug here, there's a formatting issue here, blah, blah, blah. And all these engineers started complaining to the director of engineering. The director of engineering calls my friend in and says, look, man, you really bummed everybody out with this code review crap. And he's like, wait, what are you out of your mind? How valuable is it? How valuable is code reviews, right? I mean, code reviews are something that we require at Google and every other job I've worked at for the last 12 years. So you're not doing code reviews. It's really important. But again, if people aren't used to it, they get really afraid. They're like, oh my God, no one's ever criticized my code before. Now this guy's off doing it. You can't be afraid of failure. Failure is an option, as long as you're not failing the same thing over and over again. That's called futility and a waste of time. For example, I learned how to play the guitar by screwing up royally over and over again. I learned how to program by making many, many mistakes. There's a famous story where this executive makes a mistake that loses his company $10 million. Next day he comes in, he packs his desk up into a box. His secretary says, sir, the CEO would like to see you in his office. He's like, here we go. This is it. Puts the last thing in the box. Walks into the CEO's office. Puts a piece of paper in his desk. The CEO says, what's this? He says, this is my resignation letter. He said, well, why are you resigning? He said, well, you called me in here to fire me. He said, fire you? I just spent $10 million training you. It's interesting. Failure is a common occurrence. In nature, in the world, we see it all the time. But in business or in programming, people are deathly afraid of it. And it's not necessarily people who are actually writing code or doing things. It's often managers, people who run companies. They never want to see a failure. Find ways to safely fail in the confines of your own project before launching something very large. Quick iteration is great. I talked about a feedback loop, right? Failing fast. Don't try to erase your tracks. I know a lot of people try and use features of some version control systems to sort of erase all their work, right? There's no show your work. It's like work and make a whole bunch of mistakes, and then go ahead and say, oh, I worked this out one day, and here we are with this lovely piece of code. Oftentimes, mistakes and false starts you make are really valuable information to give other people, because when someone comes back a month later and says, oh, let's try this, you can point and say, look, we tried this, it didn't work, as opposed to having some long argument or discussion. Practice is important. Okay, practice is sort of a form of safely failing, right? It makes this sort of iteration and failure cycle faster when you practice. The sort of baseline of productivity will increase. Now, one thing I know a lot of people prefer to be in a small company where they're sort of the top dog, or a big fish. I personally prefer to be a small fish. If you only work with people that you're more competent than, or that you're more senior than, you're never going to really, you will learn, but you'll learn very little, and it's not a big challenge, right? I come into Google most days scared to death that everybody's going to figure out I'm a fraud, okay? So don't tell anyone, because clearly there's some crazy smart people, and I should probably be emptying garbage cans. One of the interesting things that people that I know who I find most influential is that they have a certain quality, and that's that they're not afraid to be influenced. One thing you see often is that someone who is sort of that big alpha programmer, they're not going to let anybody change their mind. They've made their mind up, and they're just going to railroad stuff through because they're the senior guy, right? Sometimes they can get away with this if they're a big name or a big personality, and a bunch of people just want to work with them. And then they wind up learning these bad habits, and they sort of pass it along like some sort of collective casing. But if you're open to influence, you'll find that your influence grows bigger and bigger as time goes on. The same thing goes for vulnerability, okay? Repeated and vulnerability is actually perceived as a strength in the long term. It's not that bad. The inability to be vulnerable, however, destroys the ability to collaborate or compromise. If you're not vulnerable, you've got to put that stake in the sand and stay there, right? So let's move on to something slightly different. Tools. Software development tools can actually affect collaboration. However, we've seen dozens of examples of this, right? Technical solution to a social problem. We're going to put digital rights management on your music, and you're going to stop copying it, right? Nobody copies music illegal anymore. Right? As far as I can tell, or movies or anything like that. It's been greatly effective. We see that, again, on a version control gate, we see people who are doing open source projects create sophisticated path-based access control. Okay, you 6 volunteers over there, documentation people. We're only going to let you edit the docs folder, okay? You guys over here can edit everything, and you over there would be like website design and stuff, so we'll give you the website so you can tweet that. But you can't edit anything else over there. And you guys, docs guys, don't dare touch the code, right? Because we're going to prevent you from doing that, right? So my question is, first of all, it's a version control system. Anything anybody does, you get back, right? You roll back. The second thing is, if you're letting someone into your house, you clearly trust them. If you don't trust them, why are you letting them work on your project? One of the docs guys, sees a bug in the code. He's going to listen and say, yeah, I found this bug here, I want to fix this. Say, that's great, go ahead and do it. Or he says, oh, that's great, I'll take your patch, I'll put it in, blah, 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 blah. If they go over and if they go out of control, you say, hey, you shouldn't have done that. Why did you do that? What's going on? They say, oh, screw you, man. I'm going to be a coder today. You're like, okay, you're out of here. Boom. Okay? But not always. Sometimes technical problems, actually, and technical solutions can influence the way things happen. There's some very simple things. For example, when we wrote the issue tracker for Google Code, we did require that you sign in to file an issue or comment on an issue. Because we found one of the problems with issue trackers is that people would just come and say, I got this bug, and they put this bug with half the information, and you come back and say, I need information, but you have an email address, you have no way of contacting them. That was sort of a problem. Small technical decision. Made it a little bit easier. So default behaviors actually really matter. So how these tools behave out of the box. But it's not going to fix the core social issues, but they do influence our behaviors quite a bit. So I've got a couple of examples, quickly. For example, one of the things that happened in the late 90s is that people started sending out diffs in email for code review. It made a huge difference. In some cases, though, with CBS, you get like a bunch of changes and then a diff and then a message in like 3 or 4 different log emails. Things weren't getting reviewed. As soon as they managed to jam it into one thing, suddenly there's a lot more review. Distributed version control systems, right? Like you said, I was one of the authors of Subversion. Sorry about that. I use Mercurial. I'm part of the site. Distributed version systems are great, right? I'm a huge fan. Like I said, I use Mercurial. I'm on a plane. I'm writing another book with Ben, who I worked on the Subversion book with. Not a Subversion book we're working on. I can check things in. That's great. But it's really the default behavior is to go into a cave. So you have to be a little bit more careful. This default behavior is important. The basic moral of this is to pay attention to your tools, because these are something that can influence your culture or your team and sort of sway that genius myth one way or another. So the next question you will ask me is, so when do I collaborate? Okay, so how do I balance my private work versus the public collaboration part of it, right? Where's that sort of sweet spot? So projects have a sort of code, an evolution, right? You don't really need to, and I want to say, you don't need to hide. You don't need to actively prevent people from seeing what you're doing, especially if you're doing an open source project, trying to attract other people. Just don't advertise. And if someone comes up and says, hey, I found your project here, I'm interested, well, be like, okay, look, let's be cool. We're not like trying to get the whole world here. I'm not making any strong statements. So you might get an idea, sit in your cave one day, idea pops out of your head. Okay? Prototype, holy cow. One of the best things you can do for an idea. Prototypes are great because that's a way you can really quickly find out that your idea is crap. Right? Or it's pretty really good. I'm just saying. The next point is involve collaborators, and then everybody writes code furiously, and then you finally take over. Okay? So So where does the third milestone go, right? Where do you involve other people? Sometimes people involve them too late. How do you know it's too late? Well, maybe you're done. Definitely too late to involve other people. It could be, like I said earlier, a risk of wasting your own time. You could write a bunch of code nobody cares about. Okay? You can make design choices that are really undoable without completely writing anything over it. You could be reinventing wheels. Someone else could say, oh, there's a library over here that does 90% of what you just did. Okay? If you wind up working with some other people, you could come up with some unreviewable code bomb. Okay? How many people ever do code reviews as part of their job? I highly suggest investigating that if you're not doing code reviews. But if you do code reviews, do you love getting like a big 5,000 line code review? What can you do with that? You can't actually review the code for design, and at that point you're basically looking for syntax errors, like typos in the documentation, right? So at that point, if it's too late, nobody wants to collaborate because they've got no possibility to influence, right? They have no stake in it. If you want to use turn the bus metaphor around, if you've got a bus, then there's no chance for them to drive the bus. You've driven it all the way to the end, they can just come and sit there now, okay? If you rebuild it too early, there's nothing to play with, there's no running code, it's a huge risk of wasting everyone's time. Because you probably don't have a clear direction, you're going to wind up with design by committee, and it's this giant gumption stick, because everybody's trying to pull everything in different directions. Right? So that third point is the sweet spot. Idea, prototype. Then you start to bring people in, get feedback, code it all up, ship it, take over the world. All right? That point is where you have a coherent design, got some running code, you're ready to discuss your design changes, maybe backtrack a little bit because it's just a prototype. Remember, you always throw the first one away, so you might as well just write a prototype. You don't throw the first one away, you're doing it. Be ready to take criticism and revise, remember? Criticism point. And get ready to accept code, right? And don't hide your history, right? Don't hide your mistakes. Don't hide the stupid things you did working up your way to the prototype. One case study for that is Subversion. Started Subversion in 2000 with just 2 or 3 people in design doc. Interesting number I'll point out. And actually, I discovered this in Venice a long, long time ago. I won't say when I was studying in Italy. Get more than 5 people in a room, you're never going to make a decision. I found this because I went to Venice with 6 people. We get to a corner. We didn't know exactly where we were going. Let's wander around Venice. Great idea. Not a great idea unless you put someone in chance. You get to the corner, you're like, oh, where do I go next? I don't know. You stand there and you talk about it for 10 minutes. Then finally you go over there. And you get to the next corner, you repeat this over and over again. Strongly recommend get less than 5 people. One of the things that happened is we were having this conversation on a public mailing list. And people started coming in and sort of like giving us contributions and criticism. Oh my God. And we hurriedly created a private mailing list just so we could talk. Brian Bellendorf, who was one of the founders of the Apache Software Foundation, who was actually the chief technical officer for the company, collaborated that was sponsoring Subversion development, wrote us a scathing email that we were doing it wrong. We need to stop being insecure, get out there, have these conversations, and get other people involved. And we were really annoyed. Well, you don't understand, you know? It's just crazy out there. And years later, we're like, wow, he was completely right. You know? So that was one example. Another example is my colleague Ben and I. We actually wrote this talk. We write a talk every year and present it at a conference or 2. And the way we write our talks is one of us will typically have an idea. If we have no ideas, then we get together and start throwing ideas out. But if I have an idea, I'll pitch it to him. We'll sit down, we'll meet in a coffee shop, no computer, just paper, or barbaric. And I'll pitch an idea, like, oh, that's terrible. What we use the other person for is what Ben calls an ask filter. It's that I can filter the ass out of your ideas. Very technical idea. But this is how we write our talks. And we go back and forth and we collaborate. We have this tight feedback loop where we sit there for 3, 4, 5 hours and iterate on ideas and come up with an outline. Okay? And I'll take the outline typically and type it into a document. Then I'll take that and start fleshing it out. Then I'll take it and I'll start working slides. We go back and forth that way. And then we'll sit down with the slides and modify and iterate. And we'll give the talk once, we'll subject our coworkers to it, get criticism from them, usually extremely valuable, always extremely valuable, and sort of continue refining things as you go along. So that's just a couple of simple examples. So, to wrap it up in a neat little package, even though I don't have anything to give away. Don't try to be a genius. Collaborate early and often. Pay attention to default behaviors, especially for your tools. And pay attention to timing. Timing is really important. But actually, there's kind of a secret to all this. If you do all these things, people will think you're a genius. Thank you.
Now the second prize draw. Just Q&A. Question?
Why does tech count?
That's not broadly used. Tens of millions of people use tech, really? Maybe you know 10 people that use tech. It's just sort of a straw man, I throw it as an example. People will often throw something out like that. It's, I mean, really big software that's got continuous use, sort of growing and changing throughout the years, many, many years.
So 5 people, how do they design open source? I mean, do you need 4 committers and have a cabal and all the stuff, and still do it in public mailing list?
Well, first of all, there is no cabal. Everyone knows that. Well, when I'm talking about 5 people in a room for decision, I guess what I'm talking about there is when it's earlier on in the design phase, right? Where you're deciding the direction of your project. One of the things that I've seen frequently, and it's on any, you can look on SourceForge, Google Code, GitHub, anything out there, you're going to find projects that it shows up with this big manifesto and then nothing happens. Because there's no clear direction, okay? The ones that succeed are the ones that say, we're going there, and we're going to do this, but not this, this, and this, right? So they set a strong direction. And someone comes and says, well, I think you should do that and go over there. And you're like, look, dude, we already wrote it down. We're going there. And the funny thing is if you write this out and put it on a web page, people will listen to you. If you have a discussion with them on a mailing list about it, they'll argue with you all day long. But if it's on a web page, I don't care if it's a wiki, and you edited 10 minutes ago and said, hey, look over there. People will be like, someone's clearly thought about this. Try it. Try it.
So my inhibition, I'm the type to hide in the cave, labor in obscurity. And the reason I do that in part is because I'm worried. They always say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so I release something that's half-baked and people see it and like, oh, this guy's an idiot, the software is useless, and they'll never come back. And I'm worried that I'm losing these people. And so I keep it shrouded in secrecy until I'm ready and I show it, and then I'm going to get people who actually like it.
Well, so when you're talking about the release part, right? This is the conquer the world part, right over there.
No, I mean, even initially leaving it out at all. I work on it on my hard disk. Nobody has it. I don't have a web page yet. Maybe years go by.
So the argument that I would make there is that you can, if you put it up and you say, this isn't released yet. We're not taking my just sort of initial ideas. Then you can get people might want to buy and see it and come and say something to you. But typically, what you want to do there is if you have anyone you're going to collaborate with or anyone else you know that might be interested in it, is to work. Or even if you don't have that, throw something out for them, throw it out for some friends of yours who you trust to take a look at it. Just get their input. One of the things I like to do, I write a lot of articles and essays, is that I will write an article and I will hand it off to a trusted group of friends and say, hey, can you give me some feedback on this? And tell me what you think. This happened last year. We had 4 people move to Chicago from Mountain View. And it was in the summer, and they loved it. They're like, wow, Chicago is fabulous, this is incredible. But when it gets to December, I'm going to die. Because clearly it's too cold. So I said, oh, well, I moved there from New Orleans, which has 2 seasons, hot and really, really hot. So I said, I'm going to write a little essay on how to survive, how I learned to love the Chicago winter. I put it up on my blog. So I wrote, I don't know, a page. And I sent it off to a bunch of friends of mine in Chicago. I said, you guys give me some feedback and comments. And man, they just buried me in awesome ideas. Hey, what about this? Here, there's the winter garden here. Hey, you can go sleighing here. You can go this here. And I wound up writing this massive essay, like 6,000 words. And it turned out to be really awesome. It's sort of like a love letter to the city. I never would have gotten there if I just burped something out and threw it up. Right? So if you're doing something like that, I would say you've got to have somebody you know, you trust as another programmer. So I would say, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? Give me some criticism, some comments, that sort of thing. Or if you find someone else that's interested in it as well.
Questions? There's somebody behind the button. No. Really? Okay.
If anyone has any answers too, I'm on board.
So the Genius might have another implication that everybody wants to be the idea bearer. So how would you say, how would you get other people to take your project seriously and look at it instead of,
So that's an excellent question. There's two answers I give you there. One is that 99% of all ideas are crap. It's true. I mean, ideas are worthless. Execution, a good idea and great execution are the really important thing. But the second thing is it's really cool about ideas. If you don't care who gets the credit for an idea, holy cow, can you go places. So I've had a lot of ideas about Google's strategy on openness and open source and open competition. I lead a team called the Data Liberation Front, which is a name that is an homage to Monty Python, I'll have you know. Remember the JNP Front, anyone? Right? Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to do that for the record. And, but anyway, so I actually did a lot of writing and stuff about that internally, and I sent it off to various executives who were talking about this stuff. And I began to hear some ideas come out of their mouths. And I could have been like, what the heck, man, that was my idea, it's not fair, who cares? But do I have the reach that they do? Am I getting people to listen? Like they get people to listen to them? It was awesome, because these little ideas that I had were just getting worked out there. So I think a lot of it is it's not a zero-sum game. You'll have another idea. Oftentimes, the ideas that you have and the ideas that I have are really not as good as you think they are. The longer an idea stays in your head before it comes out, the bigger it gets and the more awesome it gets. It's like crack, okay? It's like brain crack. It just sort of keeps feeding on itself. And you finally like burp it out and it's like, boom. You're like, oh, really? That's it. You know? So I suggest getting up quickly and early and often. Not so often you make people crazy, but I don't personally believe I'm worried about that.
Here's one.
One more? We'll take one more question.
There's a chap at the place where I work who Python program, wasn't himself a Python programmer, and he, I told him, can you hear me?
I can see you now.
Okay. And when I first met him, I was chatting to him about development techniques, and I said, have you tried IPython? He said, no. I said, you've seen it? And he said, no, I've never seen it. So would you like to see it? No. And he wasn't prepared to hear about the fact that this might be a useful development tool. So what advice would you give people working with quote-unquote geniuses?
So this is an interesting question that often comes up. There's a lot you can do when you're in a position of influence or power. When you're sort of the low man on the totem pole, so to speak, it's really tricky and really hard to make things happen, right? People often ask me how, we talk about work culture and things. How do I influence the culture of this team? I just came to this company and I'm a new guy. We have a manager and a director that don't believe in anything, code reviews or code style, or they don't want to hear about this new thing I know. It's really hard. The best thing you can do is do what you do if you use it, for example. I don't know, in case you have to get the whole team to change, but show examples, or say, maybe at some point say, maybe I can do a little, prototype or something with it. Maybe I can give a talk to the team about it someday and show people. Try to win allies here and there. But it tends to be really hard to make a cultural change to a team when you have no influence on the team. Some of the most successful people that I know at Google, some of whom have only been there for a year or two, they realize they can't come in and just try and make big changes right away. They come in, and what they do is they just basically get things done. They're productive, they do well in the things that they're starting off on. They build up capital, right? They build up this capital and influence. And then they sort of start using it, right? So they got this big bankroll, and then they start paying it out and using something that they consider important. And the trick there is really to think about what's important. Because trying to influence people or make a change, it's like stepping in front of a train. And if you're ever in the train station here, train goes by every 5 minutes, right? You step in front of every train, you're either going to run over or you're going to piss off a whole lot of engineers. So pick which trains you're going to step in front of in that case. Find the ones that are valuable.
If I may add a tiny suggestion from my short but useful career as a consultant, sometimes the way to make change happen is if you can possibly arrange for somebody to come from the outside to tell the team exactly the same things you're always telling them, but they're not going to listen to you. You're just X. The definition of an expert is somebody who sounds reasonably authoritative and you've never seen before. That's how money is not by telling the certain things they didn't know before, but by being called in, not probably going to be the junior programmer just hired, but say a middle manager or somebody who manages to get the guy to speak to top management, but now it's authoritative because the consultant is obviously a genius. So you have to find one that has enough zero in their hourly charges to make a mistake.
That's an excellent point, and a lot of companies bring in consultants not just for engineering, for a lot of different things, because they can't make that decision internally. Sometimes they just bring someone in and make a decision, even if it's the same decision they would have made on their own. But I like that, an expert. Totally going to use that.
You want another question?
Do one more question? Yeah. Anybody have one more question? Can you see a hand go up? If not, right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.